Now, one of the questions that comes up, I like to pace too much, I'm sort of feeling constrained here. One of the questions that comes up is, and charges are made against civil juries that they're confused by the experts, that they defer to the experts, all of those kinds of claims, and I think you've heard them. I mean, you know, in medical malpractice cases, well, they just defer to the experts. What this ignores is, first of all, that usually both sides have experts, and so they've got the conflicting experts, but the cross-examination of those experts. But the other point that I want to make is the jury has a whole bunch of other evidence. So there are some cases in which truly DNA evidence, in criminal cases, the whole case may hinge largely around that expert. But in other cases, it's the expert evidence, both sides, with a lot of other evidence. And what we find is from these real juries deliberating, and you can probably read that, I just love this example because this one person says, there's only one thing I want you to all think about and notice. During the entire trial, every single doctor that he had testified said that he could not sit still longer than 15 or 20 minutes. Every doctor said that. I want you to know. Number 6 consults your notes. Before the accident? No, after it. Yeah, but it's different doctor's testimony before the accident from the doctor's after. And then number 4 replies, no, after the accident, he cannot sit. He's got a whoopee cushion, and he cannot sit for more than 15 or 20 minutes without getting up out of his chair at work and walking around. The trial, he sat through the entire thing from 2 to 3 p.m. in the court. He did not move from my chair. I took notes every single day when he was sitting. Number 2 says, my Lord, starting on Tuesday, I can tell you how long that man sat in his chair. He never got out of his chair. Number 2 says, you're good. You know something? I was moving more than he was, and my butt hurt. He sat like a rock, didn't he? You get general laughter from the jurors. He looked more comfortable than us. Every one of you guys moved. You either crossed your legs, moved this way or that. What else did you see that he was doing? They looked at his face and so forth. The point that I'm making is the content. There are a couple of things here. You had experts who were testifying and saying the man can't move. And there were a bunch of them. There were about 4 doctors in there saying that. But the jurors have a bunch of other evidence. The situation, the evidence that they have is far more complex. And it's offstage behavior is what we were referring to here, is that you have a witness testifying and you have this oral testimony. The jurors are scanning this. I could probably give you 3 or 4 exact examples that are almost identical to this, where the jurors are scrutinizing a woman who claimed a bad back problem, and she gets off the witness stand and she steps down. One of the jurors pops in and says in the deliberations, I noticed she had high heels on. When she stepped off that witness stand, she didn't even wince. And this was contrary to all the claims she was making. So jurors have a very complex set of evidence that they work with, and they apply, and they're actually told, use your experience and your common sense in all of this. I'll just give you another example 2, about jurors' reasoning. And the weight of the SUV, even going slowly, and her car didn't move 25 feet, it moved like a couple of inches. A Chevrolet Geo, it's just going to uses her hands to illustrate a car collapsing due to the collision. It would at least crack the bumper, crack the taillight, something like that. And there was an expert in this thing was talking about the speed of the car and the witness's claim. If the child, and there was a child in there, was standing there and she hit her at 40 miles an hour, 20 miles an hour, that child would have flown into the dashboard, into her brain. Yeah, regardless of how much they tried to restrain that child would have fell into it. Yeah, out of control. She claimed that a cup of soda on the floor between her feet ended up in the back. Well, apparently, now, if that was true, then the child would have hit the dash. And then the jurors, and I've identified this, clears their throat. What happened to Nancy, the other passenger, and the kid? Did they get hurt? That's what I wondered. So even in this trial, for various reasons, those other passengers were not there, but the jury is making, fighting with this issue and with all of the kind of evidence that comes with it. So here's my question. I'm coming back to these people, and here's the main kind of methodological point that I want to make. What do these people have in common? Anybody want to guess? How about General Patton? I threw General Patton in there. Obviously, he wasn't a social scientist. He was an expert on logistics, and we know him from both World War I and World War II. But before World War I started, he was a colonel, and logistics, the Army was very concerned. How do you move tanks on railroads? And what they were doing was they'd run up the flat cars and put a ramp on the flat car, run the tank up, and then very carefully, because flat cars are narrow, turn it around. Okay, and that took a lot of time. And what Patton was interested in is how can we move them faster? So where did he go? He went to observe the circus. And he discovered something very different. Observation is what they learned from what he learned from watching the circus was they put all the flat cars in a line, ramps between the various cars, ran the tanks up on one end and just kept running them across the various flat cars and cut the speed almost in half in terms of the ability to lead. The point is, he went and he observed. Now, Stanley Schachter, it is very difficult. How many people know about Stanley Schachter? Quite a few people. He was one of this century's, in fact, social psychology isn't that old, one of our greatest social psychologists. It is very difficult to believe that in the late 1970s, today it is, in the 1970s and 1980s, it is very difficult. It was just assumed, it was part of the wisdom that people could not stop smoking. The clinics were there. People were going into smoker clinics. And the recidivism rate was within a week or 2 weeks, the smokers, after getting all of this therapy and everything else, as soon as they got out, they're smoking again. And the received wisdom across clinics in the American Psychological Association, et cetera, was people can't quit. They're addicted to smoking. Stanley Schachter, who I think was a 3 packs a day man, I know he was a pretty heavy smoker. I seen him smoke. John, I think you verify that. John and Tom probably remember this study. In 1982, he wrote an article in American Psychologist. He said, well, is this really true? So he took a group of people, he took his colleagues at Columbia University, the whole psych department, and interviewed them one by one. And then where he went to his vacation, he went down the street and he collected he did some random sampling, and he interviewed people in depth. And the thing that he learned was lots of people quit smoking. So what had been the received wisdom at that point in time was simply that people were narrowly focused and were not looking on the broader context and collecting, and essentially he was collecting case studies. And of course that led then to his subsequent experimental research on obesity and on smoking behavior, which the ramifications are still extant in the literature. But the point that I'm making is he was, like Patton, a keen observer of the work and or of what happened. And what does this have to do with Alfred Kinsey? Probably even my colleagues here don't remember. In the second paragraph, he acknowledges his debt to Alfred Kinsey, when Kinsey was doing his work in the late 40s and early 50s, we didn't know anything about sexual behavior, and he went out and observed and talked to people, thousands of people, but they were all case studies, which he subsequently put together. So I just wonder who said this. I'm trying to I just ran across this about 2 weeks ago, actually. I thought it was wonderful. Any guesses? There's probably one person in the audience knows. John Darling. And I put that up there mostly because I knew John was going to be here, but I put it up for another reason. I want to be very clear that I am not opposed to experimental research. I have published many experiments myself. I have some in the works. But also the point is that there are lots of studies where we could learn a great deal by going out and doing case studies and talking in depth to people. And that sort of came up in a number of the discussions